But I think once people start better understanding ordinals, they're going to make better decisions and finally ask the question to themselves, what kind of collector am I?
Welcome to Decentralized On, where lifelong friends Chicago and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age.
Hey all, Chicago here. Two things before you get into this episode. One is we recorded this episode and three together. They were one big long podcast. One started with NFTs and where your NFTs are actually stored and how secure or insecure they are. And this one is all about deep diving into the cool, odd, strange world of ordinals and how it's all on chain. So listen to them one at a time, four then three then four, but enjoy that. And the other thing is there was a interesting Selden moment for the ordinals community where there was a disagreement. We discussed that at the end under kind of controversies, and that has been very diplomatically solved through a bunch of Twitter spaces. We kept it in there because we wanted you to hear kind of what was going on with the ordinals, and it also adds to the rabbit hole dive of how cool, quirky, and just unique they are with all the different angles and elements and facets to it. So enjoy. Now we transition. Again, this is what it was supposed to be on, which was ordinals. And I know a lot of NFTers, I've seen so much since January when Casey Rodemore debuted this to the world. They had been working on it a lot of last year, but there were so many opinions. It's a scam. It's stupid. And, I got lucky in a sense where I jumped in that first weekend. I felt like I was coming home to my Bitcoin roots again. And obviously that first weekend when I learned about it, I didn't fully understand it, but I was lucky enough to get in touch with some folks in a Discord, namely Owl, who minted just a lot of them. I didn't have a collection to mint, and I knew I wanted to get in early. So he minted my Azuki, my MFer. So Owl, thank you. I appreciate you. All below 5K. And then, of course, after that happened, the FOMO kicked in and I started buying. And I bought some fun stuff. But I wanted to dispel for people, really NFT holders specifically on the ETH side, I wanted to share why ordinals is so interesting. Love it or hate it, it's like wrapping your head around it, thinking in terms of NFTs, you can't even do it. So let's get into it. This is basic for most people, so I'll go through it quick. A SAT
I wouldn't go too quick. I need to keep coming with you. And really quick, I remember the first time I ever heard of ordinals was in Las Vegas with you, and just the way in which you explained it, it was as if it was an entirely new field of study, and it's just learning some of this and just seeing how it just evolves and goes. And one of the things that I think is just really essential to kind of keep in mind is how short a period of time this has even been going on, and just how quickly it's iterating and becoming, just this entirely different force. So it's don't go too fast, because I got to pay attention. So I didn't even know what a SAT was when you mentioned it. Now I've studied up a little bit, so I do understand that now, but continue. It's great stuff.
All right, cool. Yeah. This ecosystem, to echo your point, has evolved so quickly. I may or may not have founded and sold marketing and tech companies in the past. Cannot confirm either way, but I will say the speed at which this ecosystem matured from late January to now is the fastest I've ever seen anything. And the reason I bring up my vague history is back in the early days of, we'll call it the launch of the iPhone, and apps actually came out a year later, iPhone '08, apps '09. Even Apple back in the day didn't know how big apps would be. I had a bunch of friends there, and even they were shocked, but that ecosystem evolved very quickly, faster than probably any ecosystem before it, certainly faster than like websites evolved and stuff like that. But it took, I would say, a couple years for people to get up to speed to how you make apps, how to make them well. I mean, the company I may or may not have worked for was one of the early in that space, and there was only a handful of us in the country and the world who were best in class in the game, because back then you didn't even have a playbook. Like, you weren't really even supposed to talk about how to and help each other fix things or troubleshoot code. Apple had kind of a weird secrecy thing, and there wasn't as many ways to connect with each other. And then obviously they relaxed that big time, and then the ecosystem exploded. But again, that's all just a point to, that was a couple of years. I mean, we remember Tiny Wings, we remember Angry Birds, we remember the whole, all the flashlight apps, all the fart apps. I mean, you know, that there's so many stories in that world of itself. But this ecosystem, from the first inscriptions to full-blown stores, Magic Eden, which we're going to go to in a bit, it was 3 months and you already had like Chrome Brave extension wallets tying into the marketplaces, and now we have bids. I mean, just the reason I bring that up is, if my company was developing a ton in this space and being, you know, a little bit older, I don't honestly know if we could keep up with the brilliant minds that, and the speed at which they're developing. So it's a point off the track, but very worth mentioning.
Yeah. It's iterating so quickly, just from what I can see, which is remarkable.
Yep. So a sat is your smallest Bitcoin unit. Okay. In fact, 100 million sats is 1 Bitcoin. Okay.
Okay.
So just, we'll go back to that, but this is kind of the building blocks of ordinals and how they work and why it happened. The sat number. So ordinal theory is basically, the first element of ordinal theory is you have to number the sats from the block, the first mined block called the Genesis block that Satoshi Nakamoto mined.
Mm-hmm.
Those sats have been numbered. So that first, I think 50 Bitcoin was how many minor rewards were at the very beginning. And another interesting thing about the Genesis block that Satoshi mined, it's a very unique block because it is the only one with different properties that cannot move. And there's mystery as to why he did that, but it's just one of those enigmas. Like, the people can speculate, but it does not move. And maybe because as the blockchain builds on itself, he or she or they wanted the first one to just be non-moving, immutable. I don't know.
Okay.
So sat number, again, from the very beginning. So that first block mined, within there's 50 Bitcoin, right? So the block one, there's 50 Bitcoin. Each Bitcoin is 100 million sats. So what is that? I believe that's 5 billion sats in that first block sitting there. Well, that first sat is the first sat, and they are numbered 1, 2, 3, up to 5 billion, and then the next block, and the next block, and the next block. There's a lot of sats out there. Okay. Sat rarity is, and I'm going to get into this a little more later, but basically because of ordinal theory, and you have these number sats, you can have these people, think of stamp collectors or coin collectors. Like, I know my brother was a big coin collector when he was a kid, and I think he might have even had stamps, but I remember there's one like biplane that was accidentally printed upside down by the government on the US stamp or whatever. And, then they fixed it quickly, and those stamps obviously are worth a bloody fortune. So it gets interesting here because you get into these digital artifacts or these collectibles with sat rarity. That first sat, so every 10 minutes a new block happens, right? So in that mined block that goes to the mining rewards, there is a first sat in each one, right? That sat is called uncommon. I'll get into that later. Every other sat in the block is a common sat, but that one is uncommon. So
okay. Let me ask really quick.
Please.
I'm just trying to make sure I get it. So, and this may come across as the most basic question we've had, but ordinal theory is essentially based on order and numbers.
Yes, at its core.
At the core, right? Because you're basically numbering the sats within the blocks, right?
Right.
Okay.
So, or before that, I do not believe that in Bitcoin, it doesn't really matter what the numbers are, because if you're a Bitcoin maxi and you believe that Bitcoin is the most immutable money, which I think it probably is, it is immutable and it's all about the transaction. So what sat number you have, it's certainly irrelevant. So this is all building to how ordinals came about, but that numbering system is at the fundamental core of it.
Okay.
So if we go on, there's two important elements to understanding how ordinals were even possible. Because remember, Ethereum has smart contracts that they're separate from the Ethereum coin. They're on this other, ERC 721 infrastructure on top of the Ethereum blockchain. Like, smart contracts are what make Ethereum and what made the introduction of it so genius and so beautiful. Bitcoin, is the first blockchain in the world. So there was two important things. 2017, there was something called SegWit. And again, I'm not going to go super deep down the rabbit hole, but just enough so we get it. In 2017, the developers wanted to make sure in the community that the blocks ran more efficiently, and for security, the block size was increased to 4 megabits. I believe before it was 1, possibly 2. There was a whole big thing back in the old Bitcoin days of the hard fork. That is not the context of the show, but it was about block size. So they relaxed it a little bit in 2017 for many reasons. The block size went to 4 megabits. But what also happened with this is that, so look there, the red, the purple, and the blue. The red and the purple are transactions. So that's our Bitcoin. Just picture little teeny Bitcoin and sats on the ledger and where it goes, what public address it goes to, and all that stuff. In the blue, they were all combined in the same block. The blue is the signature. That's where data like your signature, who you are, can be put in there. They actually updated this so that you could have more privacy and you could actually leave the signature blank. So what happened was, with the SegWit update, they separated out the sats and the transactions from, it's called witness, but signature is probably more of a relatable word, so I use that, but it's called witness. They separated those two out. That witness area is where the data can go, okay? The sats side, that's all transaction based, but now the witness has been separated. It cleaned it up. It made things run smoother. They increased the block size so it could handle more transactions and be future proof, and to do other things that I won't get into. But it was a very smart upgrade.
So it basically provided potentially more functionality
and security, yes.
Yeah,
and
okay.
just it was an upgrade to the system. And the devs, this was not a hard fork where it was contentious. This was a soft fork. So they had consensus and they made this upgrade to the same chain. And then all the miners, everyone updates and everyone says, thumbs up, we're good to go.
Okay. So it's like a 2.0 to a degree.
Sure. Well, yeah, a software upgrade, if you will.
Yeah.
So enter 2021, Taproot comes in. they cleaned up blocks even more. And that witness side, they eased up the restrictions for how much data could actually be put in there. Again, Bitcoin maxis were not, and even the development team was not thinking about ordinals or storing NFTs or images or GIFs or videos on the chain, or executable code, or HTML for that matter. Like, it's pretty cool what you could do, but they weren't even thinking about that. And you can imagine it when Casey came out with this whole theory and people just started putting things up there on the chain. The maxis were pissed, and some of them have actually softened. Some have actually come around, and some are triple down, just pissed, because Bitcoin to them is only global, immutable currency that nobody can mess with. Now you're adding this complexity and you're cluttering the witness with all this data, and they just loathe it. So it's a very interesting evolution of the system. But I should have put this slide in, but the amount of volume and usage and miner rewards that have happened since late January, early February of 23 has skyrocketed. So the miners are making more. They're getting better rewards. The ecosystem is thriving. It's a busy blockchain is a healthy blockchain.
And it wasn't, just to be clear, like, this development wasn't in response to trying to, quote, like, keep up with ETH or, you know, mimic any of that necessarily. It kind of came about through this natural evolution, and people figured out, like, wait, now this is possible due to this change. And so then you have the people that were like, dude, this is only supposed to be for this, being like, well, what's happening? But to your point, I guess you're bringing more people to the party. So that's it, overall healthy for the ecosystem and the relevance and everything from that perspective. Is that kind of what's happening?
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. I'm a big fan of ordinals. And I think, again, an active blockchain is a healthy blockchain. I mean, there's some people who are worried about Bitcoin as more and more halvenings happen, that the security of the network will go down because the rewards go down. And, you know, the with all the miners out there, you know, obviously if Bitcoin price keeps scaling to infinity, or I should say, if it scales to infinity kind of with the cutting of the blockchain, then, you know, you should be okay. But that makes the security conversation, at least for now, for those worried about it. Not a lot of people aren't worried about that at all, but it makes them feel better because it is a more active chain. I believe I read just recently that 80% of chain volume and chain happenings right now is ordinals and ordinals related.
Wow. So it kind of just to zoom out for a second, it's almost like Bitcoin as a blockchain is using the bear to come up with more reasons to interface with the blockchain. So it's almost building during the bear. It's kind of a perfect time, I guess, for something like ordinals to come into the space and to be able to, you know, kind of develop a new resource.
Well, to be clear, that was not the intent at all. That's what happened. And so I agree I think it was a blessing that Bitcoin got it, because it also, remember, it brought so many smart developers back into the Bitcoin space. I mean, with Ethereum and, you know, even some of those other chains, Solana, what have you, with smart contracts, you have the flexibility to do more stuff and thus have more developers trying different things. With this, we've brought in a lot of people, probably my dev counterparts who've been into Bitcoin for a while, and then maybe, but they're developers, they started like tinkering around with ETH and the other chains. They're coming back and a whole new wave is coming in, and they're looking at it. And there are, again, I'm just going to touch the surface. There are so many interesting, cool things that are happening that are but it wasn't retrofitted for that, but it's working out almost like it was meant to be. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Fortuitous. And really quick, like when we were talking about the music industry and, A&R and everything like that, there is an element of that with this development of a whole new ecosystem of different blockchains and stuff. You want to have the best people working on developing in your world. You know what I mean? So if it's enticing and it can get, some of the smart folks to be like, I want to dig into this, that's of overall significant benefit for sure.
Yeah, you make a good point. And, again, the maxis might be like, Bitcoin needs to be hardened. We don't need to keep evolving this. It is immutable, permissionless money, better than ETH from the maxis, period, the end. So it's fortuitous, and it's an interesting time at which it all came for sure. But now that we're in a bear market, it's cool because you get to, there's not as many of us in that space. It's already a small space. Even the ETH space has been whittled down. So it's cool because you get to meet a lot of these folks and artists who are doing such cool work.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is where it gets really interesting. So this image, they're really small on the screen, so forgive me, but that skull image you see is image or inscription 0 on the blockchain. It's so just with PFPs, they start with 0 and then 1 is actually the second one. So that's 0. Number 1 is that awesome dick butt sketch, right? So here's the funny thing. And the one I pasted below that, though, that's 4 images. I'm showing that in this witness signatures here, where the data can go, you can have multiple images in one block. You're not limited to 1 per block. So I wanted to kind of show different ones. And then the 2 bottom ones, I think, were 2 of my first 3 or 4. My punk's up there in the 2000 range. So I got a bunch inscribed early. Remember, that inscription number to a lot of us early collectors is extremely important. How cool is it? Like, there are 34 million plus inscriptions right now. A lot of them are actually for these BRC20 tokens. So that's not all just art. A lot of them are these BRC20 transactions going back and forth and trading among people. So it looks like metadata gobbledygook to the untrained eye. But my point is, there's a lot of activity there. And this guy is number 0. And I think these were like 7 through 10. I just did a screenshot of all 4 next to each other. But again, many can be on block. And then this guy's like 3491. So, having a sub 1,000 one, that's pretty cool. And behind me there, I don't know how well you could see it. I think it's kind of cut off. I'd have to move my monitor a little. But that is Ordinal Punk, which is a collection of only 100 punks. And they're different than the crypto punks, but they are an homage of those and a derivative of. Those were inscribed in the 400 to 600 range. So they're all sub 1K. And that's the first thing that I hadn't had FOMO in a while since the bear hit. And when I saw that guy with his Burger King hat and his blue face and his classic shades, I was like, must part with Bitcoin. So
this is, I'm trying to track with this a little bit. So when you were FOMOing or whatever it is, and you're saying sub 500 or sub 5,000 and this or that or the other, you're referring specifically to the witnesses for the numbers, and then can you put whatever you want on there? Is it kind of like having real estate that you can populate with what you want? Or walk me through that if you would.
Yep. Good question. And it's a perfect segue. I'm glad I didn't share this stuff with you earlier, or we wouldn't have had those magical moments that I've just over articulated and ruined, because now I'm just talking about how magic it was and the magic is gone. I digress. So So let's look at ordinal 0 again. Let's look at the skull, inscription 0. Sorry. Ordinals is the entire system in the theory. The inscription is actually the art or the GIF or whatever it is, the data on chain. So it's entirely on chain. So this skull, I have it pointing to a Bitcoin in this transaction block. So this image is aligned with one sat. So remember how I said, 50 Bitcoin the first flock, so 5 billion. It's either 5 or 50 billion. Hopefully I got the number right. But there are a lot, and that was in 2009. It's been 13, 14 years. There's a lot of sats, trillions, right? So this one was inscribed in the early days. I don't think this one's inscribed on a special sat, and I'll get more into that in a second, but it is attached in this transaction. Remember, in this block, there's the transactions and the signatures. Well, the signatures and the data you put in there are etched permanently to that sat. So the sat, the smallest unit of Bitcoin, is that element or curio that is tradable within the witness or the signature part of the data field. That's where the image data is stored. So they are irrevocably connected on the Bitcoin blockchain together.
So the image can never be changed.
Correct.
Once it's inscribed, that's in place forever.
That data, and that's why Bitcoin purists and really ordinals purists, once they saw the light there, a very smart select group of some of the OGs, a lot of crypto punks, like people who probably have gone through this mental exercise that you and I did. Like I said, I've been in crypto a long time, but NFTs only since 2021. So these guys already they knew what to look for, and they understood this way quicker and smarter. I just loved Bitcoin. So I was like, hey, wait for me, I'll figure it out later. And the more I dig, the more I'm fascinated and the more I wanted to share with our nuanced audience. So those are inextricably tied together. Let's say I lose my wallet, just like a CryptoPunk too. It's not like the CryptoPunk goes away off the chain, but if I lose my, public private key pairing or don't have access to it or whatever, it's there forever. So we could put the decentralized dawn up there, and then, our grandkids could lose the key, but it's
there. Yeah.
It's there forever. And just like the on-chain Ethereum stuff. So
yeah. And just really quick to go back to that, when we were looking at, the pure on-chain from the Ethereum perspective, and then, the semi-decentralized, and then the, kind of wide open, so to speak, with the Web 2 cloud host or whatever it may be, this is on-chain, on-chain, on-chain. So if you were putting together your, kind of style of what you're interested in collecting and things like that, and that in the origin of like how the CryptoPunk is on there straight up on chain on Ethereum or whatever, this is of that kind of ilk of, if you're into that, then you would probably be pretty into this.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of the Schroeder CryptoPunk community got into it so early. And a lot of those guys are the builders. I mean, there's no accident or coincidence there. There's a group of super smart people that are building in this space, and it's super fun. And there's a lot of newer people or people who are just into Bitcoin and Bitcoin developers. So a new ecosystem is forming with the old and the folks coming over from NFTs. So it's been really cool to meet and to have discussions with some of these folks about this, because there's so many people are coming from different perspectives into the space. So these are tied together. That's the most important piece really to understand. What's interesting is, so this Taproot Wizards was the first piece of art or data that was inscribed. I believe that is number 70. So it was the 70th inscription done probably January 28th or 7th or 6th, whatever the date was. It is 3.96 meg. Basically, they, with that witness part of the block, they basically plugged the whole thing and made that as close to 4 meg as possible. They ate the whole block, every bit of the 4 megabits with that image. It was the first image to do that. And it was because we could do it first, but it was also to prove there's a new group in town that's interested in this. They're coming, and you can turn away maxis, but this is interesting. So, I mean, they just ate the whole thing. It was such a great move. And, most pictures, you try and keep them small because I believe Luxor, which is one of the most prominent miners, they were early into this stuff. I believe they were involved with, getting it on there, because it's no small task to basically dominate a block like that. I believe you've got to know what you're doing. Let's put it that way.
So hold on, let me try to process this in mind. So they essentially did an entire block with that. So
correct.
All the sats or whatever were dedicated to this image.
We'll slow down here.
Yeah, thank you.
It was attached to one sat, because remember it's an image in the data, one sat, but I believe because the signature, so the blue part was so big, I think that all the other transactions got pushed back a block or two or whatever. Like it was a clog, like a big thing came through a not so big pipe. Is the best analogy I think I could put on it.
And it was kind of like a calling card, like it's on, here we are, and adjust to us. Here we come. Yeah. And it was a great kickoff and an irreverent kickoff to the dialogue. And the Taproot Wizards they've got a bunch of PFPs there, and some of the most prominent folks in the space. I believe Nick Carter has one. So a lot of people you see, they reserve those for some of the OG Bitcoin folks, and some of them have graciously accepted those later inscriptions as kind of a token of thanks for being in that. So there will be a whole show just on some of these different collections and the fascinating that different ones are doing. But again, it was going down that rabbit hole. You're like, oh, I gotta go this deep before we decide if it makes sense to go way, way, way deeper in one or two directions. Yeah. It's like doing this, you can almost see an entire, we could do a whole series on ordinals. When we first started this episode, even I was like, well, is there a lot to cover or what are we doing? It seems a little heady, and I'm edge of my seat on this, really. So this is awesome.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad it's interesting to you. That means it's probably coming across somewhat accessible to the folks who love this space, but haven't done the deep dive as to, how permanent your inscriptions or NFTs are. Again, thank you to Midjourney for a not real cave painting, but my favorite analogy of ordinals and inscriptions is there is so much junk out there. Like I said, there's 34 million plus inscriptions. There's probably the same Bored Ape, especially the rare Bored Apes. There's probably one Bored Ape that's on there 199 times, if not 1,000 times. So there's the whole crypto punk was basically copy pasted over. I mean, and then people posted their own punks. I equate it with that cave wall that perfectly has no dampness. It doesn't change temperature. It's perfect 57 and slightly arid. So it preserves these paintings from 10, 20,000 years ago from our ancestors. And, not everything on the wall is perfect, beautiful art, but then you look over here and, people chasing buffalo in the fields as to what their life might be like day to day. There's these beautiful paintings there. That's how I equate ordinals. And some people take the side of like, this is so like, there's so much crap up there. Like it's all crap. And my thing is like, no, you've got to sift through for the good stuff. There's all this original artwork up there. Like Nullish is a prime example of someone who's just putting cool stuff up there. And there's a bunch of artists now who are focused just on the Bitcoin side because someone either shared with them information like this, or they saw the light at the permanence of putting art and data on this blockchain.
Can I ask you something about this that what I'm not squared with right now is, so you have Azuki, with the Jordan beans and everything, and you decide to inscribe it on as an ordinal, right? Is it still a functional NFT on the Ethereum side of it? Like, what happens is kind of what I'm trying to figure out. If you decide to post it on as an ordinal, what happens? Like, I don't know. Is there anything that changes in what you quote own?
This is a good question. So really good question. Cause I wasn't going to go down that rabbit hole, but it's one I think we should go down. So when that first manic weekend where Owl was so kind to help me out, I posted the ones that I owned, and we've gone over what Chiru Labs IP rights are. Basically, you can, for commercial or non-commercial, you can put it all over the place. So I have every right to do that. MFer is a CCO. So, you could slap any MFer anywhere up there. Remember, and a lot of people posted apes and punks that they didn't own. They just wanted to post them there, and then they can sport that as their PFP. So the PFP on the ETH side, my Azuki is still there. And if the green bean morphs him and his hair turns green or whatever they have planned for it, then I can get all those benefits. But interestingly, what a couple people have done, I know a CryptoPunk did it, I know a Bored Ape did it, and I know there have been others, but basically you can teleburn. So someone could actually write a contract to have it go here, go to this address. Once thing hits in this address, grab the NFT that you burned. I believe one of the teleburns for ETH is, OX 0000000. That's like, you're throwing it like that's like the base of all time and space. Like you're sending it to the owner list, to the other realm forever. Right. So what's, a couple guys, I know the ape, I thought it was cool that he did it. Apes were a lot more back then. They're, in the 20s now, but I think it was in the 50s or 60s, even several months ago. So that was a big gamble move. And there's so many apes on there. Will the ape that he threw up on ordinals be worth more? I don't know. If he put it on a rare sat, and I'll get into that in a bit, if he did it on a special sat that made it stand out there, or if he had done it in the first 100 or even sub 1K, the first 1,000 inscriptions, then he's got something. Like with my Azuki, if Ordinals picks up, I've got this Azuki, the floor right now is 3.69-ish or slightly there above. If I did a cool teleburn where I sent that Azuki to the void forever on the ETH side, I've got it at inscription 3491. If Azuki stays strong in the long run, could that ordinal be worth more? I would say, 50-50. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It could. If people get into ordinals in the long run and they see kind of the light and got excited about it like I did, or I might lose future benefit on that Azuki, with the elemental 20,000 drop. I mean, we went over this ad nauseum, but that dilution was a killer. So I mean, think about this. I've thought about this not as a negative, but as a positive. And who knows, maybe we'll do it. Think of a simple website, and, Coin Center's doing great stuff for, lobbying in DC and getting, our decentralized and Bitcoin and Ethereum and that they're really are helping change the world. These guys are on the front lines of all the log rolling and political stuff that you have to do to get heard and get things done. And, they need money. So I was thinking it'd be really cool. I could teleburn the Azuki, have him almost go through, think of Sirius Black. And I know you're not a big Harry Potter fan, but me and my family are. So you go through the portal to the other side, the void, whatever you want to call it. And you raise, call it 4 ETH. And the more you raise, the bar goes, and the closer he's kind of like lifted off the ground and floating to this void. When you hit that amount to raise, boom, he goes in, he burns up and, becomes a fiery phoenix, and then comes out the other side. And then his only existence is the ordinal. Now it raises a lot of other questions on IP rights and ownership, but I think you'd have to wonder, would Azuki see that as cool, or like that I would see it as, or would they be like, oh, like, well, you don't own the IP anymore. I mean, you would almost challenge someone to take a stance, but in my opinion, you're doing it to say, hey guys, like, hey, the Azuki price is down right now, so it doesn't hurt quite as much. I'm raising money for charity, and like
It'd be cool.
he's out there forever. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really cool. We might have to stay tuned, audience. That might be something that circles back around. I asked a simple question and got an answer that led to a potential another episode, and that's kind of how things go around here. But this, and also just a side note, I'm not obsessed, but I'm low-key very interested in caves, and have had, it's just, there's nothing like going into a cave, wherever you are. It's
primal.
Yeah. And I love the temperature. And when if
and
you
the
haven't,
smell.
yes. The
like
humidity,
the smell is like, it's like a stale rock smell, but it's beautiful. And that through our ancestors, as much as we haven't lived in caves, it's this familiar scent that's just like baked into, way back in our limbic, our pituitaries. It's cool.
Yeah. Whenever there's a possibility of a little spelunking or a little cave visit, count me in. I tend to always like to do those little journeys in the daytime.
Now, I've been in caves too, and I'm sure most of our audience has been in a cave at some point. Have you really spelunked though, or do you just like to say the word spelunk?
No, I don't really understand what spelunk is. I've gotten in entered through like a smaller hole into a larger thing. The one last thing I've always been fascinated, and I think my dad told me this because he used to do it a lot back in the day when he was growing up, but the whole notion of there being like the water in it, like the lakes in there, and then that there's like fish without eyes.
Yes.
That concept, like if I ever want to think about something, I go back to, dude, there's fish without eyes in caves, because why would they need them? And it's just an interesting thing to noodle on.
Well, and their whiskers are probably have more like sensors on them, things adapt to their environment for sure. To define spelunking, I doubt I'll get it exact what Webster's is, but I believe if you spelunk, you are descending down like through a hole into the cave. Maybe it's more just generic for like hardcore caving, but I thought spelunking was actually like the act of like you're not going to where Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher kissed. You're going to basically like you're going where most people don't go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it probably requires a rope for it to be considered spelunking in some sort of submersion gear.
Rope included. Yes. For sure. For sure.
Now back to the subject.
Yeah. No, that was an interesting question. I love caves too. And I think our audience, our nuanced audience would as well. So to kind of summarize before we go on another field trip and then just open it up to just talk about it, Ethereum NFTs, this is an analogy that I've been throwing around for a couple months now, and how my brain thinks about it. Like Ethereum NFTs are like checkers to Bitcoin ordinals, 3D Nerf Star Trek chess where Spock can't lose. Like anybody who was around in 70s and certainly the early 80s at some point must have seen this ludicrous like 4 or 5 dimensional chess set. And I love that it just goes straight up, but then there's that one off the first platform to the side, like the parallel universe. Like you just think, like when you watch that Star Trek show, like how does, like, I can kind of envision a game going up, but like, what's that little side hustle about? And why are there so many pieces on there?
Yeah. It's also at the bottom. I like it.
So this is why I laid the groundwork for ordinals, but this is why I compare it to checkers, and not even to be insulting to Ethereum. I love Ethereum, but the amount of variables in how art is inscribed on the Ethereum side is way more one-dimensional. So it is mostly centralized or partially decentralized storage. And remember, a lot of those contracts, even if they're decentralized, a lot of those contracts are open and can be changed, and can be pointed just like the goblins that have a middle finger all of a sudden pointing at you, where you've got to go like a 1-for-1 to a different contract. The on-chain file size is extremely limited, and it wasn't built for that, and that's why you've got your smart contracts and your pointers and all that stuff. Most contracts can be changed by the owners, which I already mentioned, and just kind of with a lot of these, except for the on-chain stuff, this lack of permanence. So you get to ordinals, all art is on-chain, all of it. I guess you could put something on there to point to Web 2 world or IPFS world, but as long as you stay in the 4 meg limit, why would you? And there's probably cool use cases where you could have like executable code on there that Web 2 centralized things could refer to. Like it's mind-blowing the places you could go, but I'm going to stay top level. Remember inscription numbers from the beginning. So which sat did you mint on? And I'm going to get more into that in a second. You can inscribe on differing types of sats, and I'm going to show you those. The cursed inscriptions have negative numbers. So there's a cursed inscription. So as this ecosystem was so rapidly expanding, anything that wasn't quite inscribed correctly was like, what do we do with this? And it didn't make it into the ordinals inscription. It didn't fall within an ordinals inscription number. It didn't get its place in the order. Okay. So if the 88th inscription was messed up somehow, and I believe if like 2 pieces of art like multiple on the same sat, there's a bunch of ways to mess it up, but if it was messed up at all, it was called a cursed inscription, which I think from a marketing standpoint
sounds
is
cool.
Absolutely genius, right? Like we'll get into the problems that are actually all surfacing now, but the cursed inscriptions were then numbered starting with -1. So now you're like, wait a second. So you got NFTs. When you think of an NFT, you think of a collection, right? You think of CryptoPunks, Bored Apes, Azuki, and autoglyphs and squiggles. Like you think of these art collections and pieces. With this, you have the added layer, thus the Star Trek chess set analogy, of messing it up. And then your number is there's an order, yours is negative. Like what is that? Like, wait, do I want a negative number?
Yeah.
I want to get one at I want to get -1 through 99, like all of a sudden what art is on it. Now there's 2 variables. Like, well, what's more important, having -1 or having -13 with super original cool art? Well, depends on the holder. Do you want the stamp? You got, well, with the upside down airplane, you'd have to have millions of dollars. To say have millions of dollars, do you get that? Or do you get a comic book? Or do you get this other stamp that's slightly unique in a different way? So
here's a quick question. Like I'm tracking on it. I understand a lot of it. The inscription number, what I don't understand is, can you buy the inscription number and like hold that? Is that what you're doing? And then you decide if you want to inscribe something on there, or like how is it transferable? Can you be like, I really want, number 99 and then bid for that or whatever, and then can it be like blank until you decide what to put on it?
So that's a really good question. You don't buy the inscription number. The inscription number happens by order. So you could have used any sat from, the beginning of time, starting with the second block, if you actually had access to the second block, because that one hasn't moved either. But any sat out there can be inscribed on. The inscription number is the order at which it was inscribed since people started inscribing with Casey Rodamore's first one at 0, the skull. So that's why we early collectors, like my favorite one, and the guy in my background here is that's half cut off there, is I think number 478 or 479. So that's a sub.
So you
1K.
got it under, you got it under.
And there's a couple groups, but there's a sub 1K club. There's all sorts of groups, and there's so many interesting people here. So you don't buy the inscription number. That's just an order. And now that we're at 34 million, you can never go back to sub 100. So those are locked in, but this is where it gets interesting. You can buy a unique sat. So I'll get into that in a bit, but it's a sat that you put your image or whatever in the witness data. That's the first sat of a block of the 100 million sats. It's the first one. That is called an uncommon sat. So a common is all the other ones. An uncommon is the first one in the block. A rare is the first one in the block in the adjustment period. The adjustment period, when, if miners come on and offline all the time, the adjustment period is when it recalibrates. Like a lot of miners went offline. Well, hey, miners are leaving. The reward gets spiced up a little and it recalibrates. That first sat is a rare. Right now, I believe there are only 434 rares possible. And remember, like in Michael Saylor's stash and Coinbase's stash, most of these things are locked up. And some of these people who don't really recognize these things, those things are just sitting there. And people like me are like, I could put my grandma's like awesome brownie recipe on this rare set. Like, man, I don't know if I'd be willing to spend. One of them just went up for 6.7 Bitcoin, I think. So what's the math? 180, 200 grand or whatever. I mean,
okay.
Yeah. So you can inscribe on that rare sat only 400 until either now or till the end of time, whatever it is. It's a very small number. And that's only the third level. So you can buy the sat and then inscribe what you want on that. And then once you do that, then it gets the inscription in that you get a number once you activate that. So basically there's a market for I'll say the wrong rare instead of unique or whatever, but there's a market for the cooler sats to be able to then do what you want on it. So that's kind of like the real estate that you're scoping out, and anything that's kind of different or unique. And, you get into, you're saying there's negative ones and all that. So it's like, well, what's going to be built on the negative side of the street, Right.
So that's where it really starts getting cookie.
Yes. And that's why the analogy of the Star Trek chess set, because those are just a couple of them. So whereas NFTs they're minted as collections, and the collections work within themselves, but there's no ordinal theory. There's no uniqueness. There's no going on to sats. The sats throws you like this mental curveball of like, oh, weird. So again, what's more important in some of these, the sat or the art? If you're the guy or girl who put the first image on the first rare sat inscribed, and the image is a silly image like Kermit the Frog, it's not, but if it was, you'd be like, well, that's the first rare sat. That Kermit the Frog on an uncommon or even now maybe, a common or even an uncommon, it has some value. But you can get uncommon sats right now. I think they're a couple $100, but a rare, those are tougher to find, and that's the only one I've ever even seen for sale for 6.7. I'm sure they'd part with it for less, but I don't know. I mean, that's pretty valuable. I mean, can you imagine if this show did really well over the years and we, let's say we updated our logo from decentralized dawn and just had like a D squared or some cool idea like that you came up with last week. And we put it on a rare sat, and it was the sixth one minted. And, Bankless bought the rights. They really wanted, I think, go after Wells Fargo. So they bought the rights, I think, to the Philadelphia 76er stadium. I know it's in Philly. I don't know which stadium it was. And then they did a huge deal. So if you're making a ton of money and we had to spend like $100,000 on a rare sat to debut our new logo, and that's like the 11th rare sat only that's inscribed, and there's only 400 out there right now, and most of them are locked up. Like, that's pretty good PR, and that's pretty good, that stadium in 100 years will be gone, but it's weird to think about, but the sat won't be, or maybe the stadium will be different. It probably won't be Bankless forever. Maybe it will be. I don't know, but it's just like, it makes you ask these really philosophical permanence versus impermanence questions. So
are really, when you're talking about, Sailor or Coinbase and, people who possess significant amounts of Bitcoin, and since it's all, you can see everything, right? It's all transparent. Is anyone able to see like who's really holding some of these different sats?
Yeah. If you know whose wallet there, you can make a guess like, oh, that's one of Binance's 3 big wallets. And there are really smart folks out there who got a good front run. Think about it. It's just like, you don't do it as much anymore because coins aren't, pennies aren't even copper anymore. They're zinc. They cost more than a penny to make. Like, it's all broken. But remember, as of 1964, I believe coins were still silver, right? So coin collectors would go to banks and just be like, roll a quarters, please. Roll a $half, please. How many do you want? I want 10 rolls of each. You scour through those. And then, 20 minutes later, or next day or whatever, you go back and you do it again and again to find that stuff that's circulating in the system. These same people are going to Coinbase and be like, I'll get more, exchange, and really try and hit those maximums to get those rare sats. It's fascinating how the parallels of coin collecting and stamp collecting and kind of physical good collecting. It's and Casey's the one who used the word curio, which I love that word, but it's just like it's so much closer than an NFT when you start to break it all down as this true collectible that fire can't destroy because it's truly decentralized. It's beautiful.
I don't want to segue or digress too much.
Please segue.
This is just sticking in my head and I can't.
Yeah.
So going through this process of this conversation today, I'm becoming more and more, interested in getting involved in the ordinal space to some degree, and to do that. And you were talking a little bit about, the Bitcoin maxis, or some of them had potential, resentment towards this opening up and everything. And I know that there's a lot of people that are extremely, Ethereum centric and, ETH is the future, Does Ethereum get significantly impacted negatively if there's a bigger transition to people adopting ordinals, or is so many other things getting built on Ethereum that it's not necessarily that relevant to the ecosystem overall and to the success of the blockchain?
Oh, how does it affect Ethereum? I would say no, because they each chain has their uniqueness. I mean, remember, Ethereum still invented the NFT, right? With the super early stuff. So I don't think people will go away, but I think once people start better understanding ordinals, they're going to make better decisions and finally ask the question to themselves, what kind of collector am I?
Does Ethereum have the capacity potentially to adopt similar mechanisms that are being explored and developed by ordinals in terms of numeration and things from that perspective? Or is it just not possible because of the facts of the chain of all the elements that we have, with that we talked about with the centralization and things from that perspective? Is it just, it can't be done or mimicked on Ethereum? Like this is completely unique to something that could only live on Bitcoin?
I guess some developer could figure out a way to number all the old Ethereum things. But I guess the thing is like there'd be no market for it because Ethereum's about smart contracts. It's just different. Like it's funny because what makes, Bitcoin from the non-Bitcoin maxi and from the other chains are like, we get your narrative of immutable money, permissionless and all that, and it's money only. And then while people are doing DeFi, Summer, and NFTs and CryptoPunks and all that cool stuff, but Bitcoin is in this Taproot and SegWit upgrade, and the way that Bitcoin's done, in the fact that it wasn't even this upgrade wasn't trying to compete with Ethereum. It was totally trying to do security issues and streamline it, make, your TPS or transactions per second more efficient and better. It just the whole network better. And then Ordinals came with it. And then Casey came out with this numbering of sats. And then, he just kept being like, wait, and then there's the first sat, that's an uncommon, I would have loved to have been in the room early. Probably there was probably bongs in the room somewhere or some sort of micro dosing of or just super creative minds or him just thinking about, wait, but also this and that weirdness and the oddity of how Bitcoin works and how this was figured out. And now how all these smart developers have come into the ecosystem, layering other elements on top of this. Is the oddness is what makes it so cool, I think. And I don't think, to answer it in one word, no, you can't. You cannot replicate on Ethereum what Bitcoin has done.
Okay. Wow.
So I'm not like recursive inscriptions. This is as deep down the rabbit hole before we go on our next field trip. But with recursive, you can have an older inscription that's already there that has code that newer inscriptions can refer to and be impacted by. So I'm not going to go deeper down the rabbit hole, partially because I can't yet, because that's one of those that you fall super deep and have to get technical. But there's also parent-child, which parent-child is, let's say my ordinal punk that's behind me, number 479, I can make children based on that. So it's based off that address, and then I could make children one. I could have a whole art collection based off the 479. Then I could, in a way, teleburn that one to make them the link to 479. So I guess the analogy, it's almost like, now we're talking, like, we went from talking about like 5th grade math and addition, subtraction to linear algebra, just basic simple equations without x squareds in it. Now we're talking about quantum physics, and we're talking about like black holes and parallel universes. And that's why Ordinals is so fascinating from a collector standpoint.
Yeah. I want to, maybe not today, but I want to have a bigger conversation about this parent-child, like that whole concept. And you're right, like just the nomenclature and all of it. It's like, it's very sticky from a intellectually curious position, like, well, what does that mean?
Right.
You can do all these things. So,
right. Well said. So now it's time to go on our field trip, and we're going to actually look at a marketplace and see why this is so weird and interesting. So we'll take a little jump here over to ord.io. Magic Eden is actually the marketplace that has I don't want to say they've won the battle, but Magic Eden is the place where most of the transactions publicly are happening. But there's a bunch of marketplaces. There's like 5 or 6. Ord.io does a really good job of identifying different sats. As you can see at the top, kind of nav, you can look at images, GIFs, text, videos, games. So you can run executable games on here. I mean, you can run little bits of, if it's under 4 megs, it's code, dude. It's data. You can run all this stuff on there, audio, you name it. So where this is interesting, so I told you about, the numbers. So I can show you 0 to 100. Let's go there. So there's what I explained before. There's ordinal 0. I don't know why the first 2 did I put in. Oh, because I did 0 to 1. I thought I put 100. So you put 100 in there. And here are the first 100. So you can imagine. And look, again, like the cave wall analogy. I don't know if Angela Lansbury was on a cave wall, but if she was, that would be strange. And then maybe aliens have come back and forward in time to
not
to
once, but twice.
Yeah. Oh, it's Angela. Oh, yeah. That looks like a murder she wrote. But so there's a lot of interesting stuff on there.
So is this essentially the chain?
These are the first ordinals inscriptions starting with 0. Yes, this is. So these indexers are saying who was first. So here's ordinal 0. Here's ordinal. I don't think that is it. Why isn't the crypto? So these are for some reason not, they're probably sorted by trending. So these are actually not in perfect order.
Okay.
Here we go. Oldest. There we go. So there's your dick butt. There's your awesome rotating parakeet head. There were the 4 that I copied for you yesterday, but on and on. Like some of this is cool. Some of this is, super punk rock and like Bitcoin ethos. You'll see Pepe in the Bitcoin world is a huge recurring theme. And I believe I'll get the title right, but if you haven't seen the documentary on Matt Fury, I believe it's called What Me Worry, I believe.
I think that's right, but we'll put it in the notes.
We'll put it in the notes. Watch it because I thought Pepe started out bad, and it's furthest from the truth. Pepe started out created by this super humble guy in California. It was awesome. And then the alt-right took it over, and then it was really commandeered back through crypto. The story of Pepe is in many ways the story of kind of politics and life in the last 20 years. And I know that sounds like a stretch, but watch the movie and see if you agree with me or not. Yeah. So here are all the top 100. You got shrooms, which haven't even been distributed yet. You got these Pepe cards. Obviously, Banksy. You got nods to Banksy. You got all sorts of stuff. And this is just the first 100 there. I believe that this image is up a bunch. I have to imagine that 76 is the 4 megabit one, but I'm not positive. I'm 99% sure that's it, though. Bitcoin rocks are super OG, starting at 77, but there was Ethereum rocks, and Bitcoin rocks are probably one of the most coveted out there. So first time a CryptoPunk shows up, second CryptoPunk. So,
so we're essentially going through the cave right now.
We are going through the cave, and we started the tour at the back of the cave, and then we would be going forward. And if we actually went through the whole cave, we would walk through 34,112,000,000 whatever inscriptions. It's just all nuts. So that's just one layer, right? So you got your range. Let's clear our range. Now let's get kind of crazy. So remember I was talking about sats. So you've got your uncommons, which is the first of each block. The rare is the first of each block in the first adjustment period. Epic, if you could get an epic and inscribe my grandma's brownie recipe, oh my gosh. Epic is the first sat of the first block after the halvening. So you can imagine these are getting not whatever is beyond exponentially rare, they're getting exponentially rare. So Nakamoto, this is kind of cool. Let's just pick one of these. So all of these things that you see here, these are based on the oldest. So this bear right here was inscription 663,910. This is the first one. Check it out. There's a little key here. I love this. So this was a Nakamoto. It was a sat mined by Satoshi Nakamoto before he disappeared forever, he or she. So that was the first sat you just saw mined on that. Some of these have multiple qualities. So I actually found in my stash, I've got a couple palindromes. So the sat number, not the inscription number, but the sat number is the same forwards and backwards. So think about what an artist could do there. And there's so many cool things you could do. I don't know if you know about this. A lot of people do, but if you haven't been around as long, you might not. The first Bitcoin transaction on May 22, 2010 for pizza, 10,000 Bitcoin in 2010 were given for a pizza delivered. So the person, I believe it was country to country too. So he said, you send a pizza to my house, you got 10,000 Bitcoin. And so you could use, remember that's 10,000 Bitcoin. I'm not even going to attempt to do the math, but 10,000 times 100 million we're probably in the trillions, right? So that's a lot of sats. That's rare. So is getting a pizza sat hard? And will it be hard? Probably not. But if you do the right type of art on it, that's just another layer of buzz that Ethereum doesn't have. It's so cool. Vintage is the sat mined in the first 1,000 blocks. Remember, in the early days, it was Satoshi, and Hal Finney is the one who received the first, I believe, transaction, or he was also the first one other than Satoshi who was kind of testing the system out to receive mining rewards and sats, Bitcoin, right, for the first block. Just a funny little note.
Wow.
Back when Bitcoin originated, the mining reward per block was 50 Bitcoin per block. Obviously, there was very few people involved back then. Now it is 6.25 Bitcoin per block. At the halvening, which is going to happen in the first part of next year, it will cut in half again. So 3.125 or whatever. So it's pretty fascinating. So all of these different things are different types of sats that you can inscribe on. And again, if you mess up your inscription, it goes to cursed. So the amount of
layers,
variables, and think about it, because it's not like you're just adding a layer like, it's the art or project, and then it's the inscription number. So that's kind of 1 and 2. But then you're going to add the type of sat that it's on. Is it cursed? Is it not? You can have multiple of those. A lot of these attributes that I just clicked on are like the block 78 is also part of one of these other ones. So, but imagine if you have a palindrome that's in block 9, like there's probably not as many there. So how rare is stuff? You just have to start doing math, dividing billions by trillions and stuff like that. So you can see how it quickly gets very interesting. And these early collectors are, kind of like, what do they find? What art do they find coolest? And what attributes or sattributes do they find coolest?
What does first transaction mean? I can't read that.
This is super small, so I apologize. The first transaction is the sat from the 10 Bitcoin sent from Satoshi Nakamoto to Hal Finney in the first Bitcoin transaction ever on January 12th, 2009. So to transcribe that, it's saying it's the first time someone made an effort to send you Bitcoin, not being mined, but from actually making a transaction. So cool.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't it like...
Yeah, it's incredible. It's like the whole thing for someone newer like myself getting in and being hooked and fascinated, by just some of the bigger elements of the space. But then to see something, what blows me away the most is like, this didn't exist, like 8 months ago, really. And then
Yeah.
to be able to see all of that, it's just like, it's incredible, the different, the pace and the maturation, but then just the stickiness. Like, I'm going to be thinking about this for a long time now because I had no idea. And I would, I'll be vulnerable. I would see on crypto Twitter or anything like, oh, ordinals. And then, there's a couple people that'll be like, I don't really understand everything that's going on with ordinals, but there isn't like
Yeah.
a great place to go unless you're kind of already networked in with some OGs and people that are on the cusp and understand it, and you're in discords or this, that, or the other. But just the mental stimulation that this provides, it's like, I hate to say it, but why wouldn't you want to do this over other opportunities to collect things? Like, it's just such a, I don't want to say it turns into a no brainer, but after this conversation, I think I'll be spending more time on Magic Eden sniffing around than I would in some of the
Yeah.
other marketplaces.
And it's super fun, like on Magic Eden, just to look at, you might be looking at uncommon PFP collections, but, also I think the more you get into it too, just, I think the more you get into the space, the more you appreciate the art and the artists, and the PFP, I think is a gateway in, whether you're an Ether or Bitcoin or whatnot. And, it creates kind of groups and tribes that you can relate with and talk to. And generally you gravitate towards the people and the things that are kind of important to you and are kind of sub resonating in those groups. But, through all this bear, it's funny. And this is probably a different show, but if you look at, utility PFPs versus CCO PFPs, everything's fallen kind of equally. I think my theory is the CCO stuff, the more non-utility open stuff the early stuff especially is going to stand the test of time better because you're not dependent on that utility in a future drop. Because at some point the team moves on and there is no future drop, right? So at some point the movie has to end where art and non-utility doesn't. But what I think has actually held the strongest through this is good art. Now those have fallen too, but I know I've looked at the numbers, and again, this is probably another show, but they have weathered and not gone down as much. Art and art history were huge in my family with my mom and my mom's side of the family. And I always appreciated art, but I never was fully immersed in it and got it. Yeah, I bought some art for the house and stuff, but I didn't really care as much. And now it's getting more and more interesting and important to me. And I love to know who the people who are creating the art that I do, and that's just me, and I like to know their backstories, and I like to get to know them. And that was obviously possible in the regular meat suit curated world, but in the NFT world, like those artists, I know it probably gets stressful to have to be online and have to have like do I have to promote myself, or can other people do it? Do I have to pay them to do it? Like there's all that. But if you see a piece of art that you love, like one of my favorite artists is, I don't even know how to name them, but it's like 0010 on Twitter. Like their art, I just love the art. And, if I see something I love there, it's beautiful and I can reach out to them. So it's been cool to go down the path.
Absolutely. What you were saying about, somebody you would have loved to have been in the room when it was getting, launched and developed and ideated out and everything. But there's so many elements of art just in kind of the build out of the ecosystem, or, like all that's really curating art. Okay, well, we're going to invent, something called cursed like that's artistic and that's completely organic. And what's cool about it is when you look at art overall, a lot of times it's different periods where there was different movements within it. And it was kind of a laddering up of, what was going on before. But this has the opportunity to be a completely blank slate in terms of the past. And it's just building on itself. And I think that's part of why the iteration's so quick and why it's able to, you're not constrained by anything like, okay, well, let's build this out. Yeah, let's go. Because there's not like these, kind of rules or roadmaps that you have to follow. So I think that's part of why once you kind of, and you did a great job just kind of breaking it down, because to me it felt somewhat unaccessible. Like, dude, I don't think I'm going to understand what they're talking about with, like, ordinals and into all this stuff. But once you kind of understand it to some degree, then you're allowed to kind of kick back and be like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. And there's a lot of new things that can come. And the more people who are kind of exposed and put their foot in the water on this, I think it'll just keep having other people want to tell other people about it and kind of go, because it's not just like, what was the old argument in the big bull market when I jumped in, it was like, well, it's just a PFP. It's just a, whatever, you could just right click it. And it's like, this totally takes away that whole, hey, you could just right click it, argument. So it's pretty, the depth.
Right click it. I invite you to right click it. Like I have the private keys to it, but I want you, if people want to use that ordinal punk as their PFP picture, I welcome you, because I'm not an influencer, and I don't tweet enough, and I'm not a slave to the algorithm enough to be one. But if you want to use my crypto punk or my ordinal punk or any of my MFer, like, use it, because you probably have as much or more reach than me. Get it out there, like, because it's art. And you made a really good point. By being digital and immutable and allowing artists to connect closer with the collectors and so many other reasons, new forms of art are coming aboard, like creating an executable video game as art. I mean, on the blockchain, not only is that permanence, but it's art in and of itself, either whether it's an old or a new game. So you're redefining even what art means in this digital era as we just keep evolving further and further into the digital nano information, and now obviously the AI era. It's awesome.
I really am going to be shocked that these words are going to come out of my mouth, because I've mentioned from the beginning, I always kind of tune out when everyone's like, oh wait, the bears are good. This is when you build and the good things come of it. Cause I'm sitting there like, hey, I jumped in at the tippy top and I just got sideswiped into this bear and this pro bear mentality. It's like, well, what, actually it's important. We needed it, but it kind of feels like it's a perfect time for this to get built and developed, and to not have a million eyes on it and a million, people doing their takes and analysis, and kind of let it breathe and evolve, because it's almost I hate to say exponential, it's overused, but the amount of development and growth, like if we did this show in a month, there'd be some addendums, in terms of, well, actually now they're doing this and you can do that. And that's really riveting.
Yeah, and it's funny because of the addendum. We'll add that to the end as we wrap out. But it's funny the way you phrased the Bears, and you're like, they're good, and the Chicago Bears right now are 0-3. And I honestly, those first two sentences, I'm like, why are we talking about the Chicago Bears and how terrible they are? I'm already upset about it. It's both of our hometown. Like, anyway. So yes, but as far as moving forward, there is a small addendum that we can wrap with. So, I got you all excited about ordinals, explained it to the best of my ability at this time without trying to go too deep and confusing people. But there's, if people have been active on Twitter lately and have any ordinals followers or follow any of those influencers, you've seen the story. There's a big controversy right now. And it's really its first Selden moment, and referring back to Foundation book, but the cursed ordinals that I explained before, for indexing those inscription numbers, they are causing a big problem. And the more that's getting inscribed every day, the more that problem can't be ignored. So now that we have Twitter Spaces, the dialogue that is going on has been very, I will say, surprisingly impressive at how it could very well get heated. And somebody, I think it was Leonidas, who's a very prominent person in the ordinal space, said, had the Bitcoin fork, had they had spaces, and if it wasn't Leonidas, I apologize, whoever did say it, but if they had spaces back then, maybe the fork wouldn't have been as contentious because people could just hop on. They're on, the crypto community is on Twitter anyway, and they could have talked this out. So it's an interesting contention as an aside. But what's going on is the developers are like, look, we got to fix this. And it's a bug in the code and it's broken. And if we want to keep this clean moving forward, we've got to reindex retroactively, right? Because this is kind of a layer on top. And you can imagine, and there's a lot of supporters of that, a lot of dev supporters, maybe a lot of people who inscribed later numbered collections might not care as much, or people who inscribed on uncommons and were later to the game. But you can imagine even more than me, like some of these big whale collectors and some of these early developers who were just like getting that Ord wallet setting up and throwing their collections, getting them up, like the inscribed Pepis and the little Peppos and so many of those. There's some concern in that early adopter community because there's talk that inscription numbers really aren't that important and indexing is really hard. And there's other things that are easier to keep it organized. I believe it's called like token ID, which is a string of numbers and letters. Like it's kind of meaningless. So a bunch of us are like, well, wait a second. Like my take is there was like with any systems or code, like I said, my software company, we build stuff. It's good at launch, but it's not perfect. We're always iterating and maintaining and making it better and adding on and on and on. So the imperfections of Bitcoin inscriptions and ordinals and the nuance of them is what made them so interesting to collect. And that's cursed included. Now, I'm not saying you don't get rid of the problem, but our contention is don't retroactively get rid of it and then the cursed get shuffled in. So think about if you had inscription 999, you're in the sub 1K club. You just got bumped to, there's only like, we're guessing 8 to 10 in the first 1,000. They became more popular later because once people saw, oh, I can screw up this transaction and be one of the early cursed. Like I wasn't early on the regular, so I went early on the cursed. You can see all these gold rushes that just kept mounting after each other. And, that person's going to be pissed. But Crown said it best in one of my groups. It's not even about shuffling it back in. Yes, we want all the bugs to be fixed. It's about the trust, especially from some of us early collectors, that you can just go and be like, oh, that was a mistake. We need to keep that trust, or some of these collectors, I can guarantee you, are going to be like, you just failed for some of the OG collectors. And I'm not even putting myself in this group. I'm putting a lot of these really smart guys who know a whole lot more than me, and they have a right to be pissed. And I am in that camp, and that I'm upset about that too. Cause I said cursed was a good marketing ploy. It's genius. The name is genius. It's interesting. And again, it's like one of 19 levels and layers that can be combined together to make the art interesting beyond just the piece of art. So our
That's a great
goal would be to, we're at 34 million, say at block XXX, whatever it is, 9 weeks from now or whatever, reshuffle it then, but preserve how it was, because how it was from the beginning is such an interesting, quirky, weird part of the history of inscriptions and ordinals.
Yeah, and it almost, and again, I'm not as versed as you on this at all, but my take on that side of it would be like, it almost would feel like centralized in a way, that if they go back and kind of retrofit it, like the whole point that we were saying of what's so compelling is like, this is legit on chain and this is forever and immutable and all those principles. kind of being like, we're going to do a little restart and wash what might not seem, as clean. It seems to go against the whole spirit of the whole
immutability of a blockschain. Yeah, like, this is a layer on top.
Fundamentally seems wrong to be like, hey, we're just going to, use the backspace out of that, and it didn't happen. Like, that's what's beautiful, and that's what's beautiful about art, like, and about music. Like, you'd love to hear how it evolves. You love to hear like a demo of a song and then be like, dude, that turned into this. Or people, you watch, you look at different painters and stuff like that, you're like, oh, that's their early work, and then they went into this phase when they kind of figured this stuff out. And you don't know when those hit. Sometimes it hits later in life, sometimes it's just early, and that's when it's going to be. But you can't change what happened. Like, fundamentally, that just doesn't seem to jive with the whole movement.
Yeah, and I would say the biggest mistakes or quirks of something often make the best discoveries in art, and that is so true for Bitcoin inscriptions. Keep the weirdness early, even if it's hard for the indexers, but fix it moving forward, and you'll retain the faith and trust of the early builders and collectors who jumped in. And yeah, does this affect my bags? It does. That not that my ordinal punk might go up 478 to 479. So if I cared about being sub 500, I still would be, but that's not the point. Again, as Crown said, it's about the trust and not alienating the early collectors, because from a developer standpoint, it feels wrong or buggy. Like, figure out how to fix it so we preserve that weirdness. So the history in the art of Bitcoin, which many people who've gone down this rabbit hole that we went through today together, that's why they're going over. And that's why more and more artists are coming, and they're coming fast. We need to keep that trust. So absolutely, Casey and team, please consider what we're saying and do grandfather those in. And you hit on it. It makes you make a very important point. Who's in control? So can 3 of these devs who have access to the Git depository, that's not decentralized and immutable. So now we have to get to that first celled moment of who's in charge of this? How do we decentralize this and make sure all voices are represented? So, democracy and compromise is messy, but having it in the hands of the just more on the dev side and those 3 people and a lot of the influencers on Twitter, their opinion is not necessarily my opinion. And some of the people who have been the biggest, smartest collectors are going to lose faith. And that makes me nervous.
Yeah. The only thing that can ruin something that's got all this going for it is credibility. And that's essentially, and the ethos of the whole freaking movement. And what's attractive about it is that the essence is decentralized. That's the entire point. So I don't care if you're a maxi or whatever it is. Like, if you're just looking at it from a somewhat intellectual perspective, that doesn't jive with everything else that's the whole freaking point of it. So
yeah,
I didn't know that was a development. Like,
yeah. So we brought the Audible in there to update you, because this has all been going down for the past, 10 days or so, but it was important to bring up because it's fresh and it's new. And it's, had this not happen, a lot of you, and then I certainly Disco would have walked away like, Ordinals is that could be, either ETH on chain or Ordinals could be my number one. Yeah. What kind of a collector am I? We ask ourselves, but Ordinals is not perfect either, and it's going through its growth, and it will come out the other side fine. And there will be new collectors who, just like when Bitcoin forked, the people who came after just grabbed probably Bitcoin, unless they got really bad advice and grabbed Bitcoin Cash. But so it's not like this is make or break, but keeping that nuance. It's just one thing I I feel so strongly about that. You've seen the quirks and the nuance. Keep it, preserve it, because if Bitcoin as society goes more and more decentralized, and we literally evolve how we organize with each other as a society with blockchains, preserving that piece will be such a cool part of the history. I'm always thinking 10, 20, 100 years out, and let's keep it pure.
This is kind of a side note, but we talked about the playlist earlier, and that being something that's ever evolving. For the day ones who have listened to the show, through its whole 3-episode arc so far,
huge arc, and it went.
And it was just a massive audience, I'm sure. But I was talking after the end of the first one, I came to the conclusion that I think I was going to purchase, a specific NFT based on, kind of the learning I had by going down this journey with Chicago. And after the second one on music, I got more inspired to look at a couple other items to kind of collect and put into the bag. And now at this point, it looks as if I may be adding another item to the collection and getting into that. So it may be fun just to kind of see the evolution of, at the end of these, for some reason, I guess it means that I'm very bullish on everything and just, very new and interested and excited, but there's nothing that hasn't, really sparked interest and a motivation to learn more and to collect and become a part of. So thank you for kind of giving this primer. I know it's difficult to, look at something that's so engaging and big and fast and quickly evolving and be able to kind of be like, okay, but what are kind of the key points to kind of teach someone how to square dance? And I think you did a great job with that today, because I certainly feel a lot more in the loop, so to speak, on what's going on in that ecosystem, and very excited about it overall. So.
Well, I appreciate it. And you and I, as we got into crypto, and like so many people out there, we were talking about it anyway. I think one of us was finally like, wait, why don't we just record this? Because we're fascinated about it. It kind of gives us incentive to go down these rabbit holes and dig a little deeper to understand it better ourselves. Because, our goal here is to, with decentralization, to make the world a better place. I know that sounds schmaltzy and sappy, but with kids and kind of being forward looking, I want decentralization to get rid of a lot of these middlemen. And art was a good place. Decentralized finance is coming, but obviously the TradFi fiat system is resisting big time, and we're just going to keep digging down rabbit holes. So if anybody out there has any ideas on shows, we've got a bunch of ideas that we're coming with. This is our third one, but we have at least 20 good solid ideas that we're going to go down the rabbit hole. But please leave in the comments and just let us know what you want to hear, and reach out to us on the socials. Decentral Pod on Twitter, on X, and on YouTube. And we're going to release all 3 of these videos at the same time. So listen to the other ones in our library, and we're just feeling this out, getting started as 2 old friends. So thanks for coming on this journey with us. And Disco, do we have anything to share with them?
I think that, as always, this program is designed for entertainment purposes only. This is not financial advice, and we encourage you to always do your own research before making any moves.
Yep. Take care all, and have a good one till the next show.
Until then.